Hi everyone, it's Roger and James here from the What's on Disney Plus podcast. In this week's episode, we're going to be talking about all of this week's Disney Plus news. So we're going to be talking about some of the trailers, a number of this week's new releases, including Miss Marvel. We'll also be doing a full discussion on Thor: Love and Thunder, but we'll do that right at the very end. And so if you haven't seen it by then, but we're probably about 45 minutes away from that right now. But before we do that, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. If you haven't already done so, make sure you subscribe here on YouTube. You can also subscribe on the audio platforms as well, like Spotify, iTunes, etc. You can also find us over at What's on Disney Plus. Join our mailing list, whichever way you want, just to keep up with all the latest stuff that we do. So we're talking a little bit more about Patreon and YouTube channel later on, but let's jump into the news. It's been a little bit of a kind of a quieter week, really, with sort of the Independence Day weekend last week, and then with Thor: Love and Thunder. Disney kind of been very much focused on that this past week. So there was a couple of trailers that was released. We got the first trailer for Light and Magic, which is a brand new documentary series coming on July the 27th, all 6 episodes. If you're a fan of Industrial Light and Magic, this is the one for you for special effects. I think it looks really good. What about you?
Yeah, watch the trailer. Looks good. I'm not sure that it needs 6 episodes, which I think was what I saw at the end of that. But we'll wait and see. And I love behind the scenes stuff, especially Star Wars behind the scenes. So looking forward to it, and we'll see if it merits 6 episodes in the end.
Well, the only thing I thought of like with the 6 episodes is because it's obviously got, we're like 40-50 years of history. There's, I think and there's so much different stuff that they've kind of got into, like model making, computer graphics, all the bits and pieces, and the stuff that's come off from there, and maybe also expanding out a little bit, because I thought the trailer did a good job of showcasing like Indiana Jones, the Marvel, Pixar, and all the rest of it. That it's not just about Star Wars.
It's going to depend on how much of it is about ILM itself and how much of it is about the projects they do and how much they mix. So if they're going to go and do, well, we worked on Star Wars and these are the behind the things for A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, and they all get individual sections, if not episodes, then okay. But if it's just ILM, well, in 1977 we released Star Wars, in 1970, etc. So we'll see. It also depends on how long the episodes are, because it didn't specify. There's a big difference if they're half hour or hour long.
Yeah, no, looking forward to seeing that on there. Other than that, like I said, we've seen some new clips from High School Musical coming up. We've also got some new clips dropping from Zombies and stuff. But generally, this month's a little bit like hit and miss, I think, in terms of like what series and stuff we're getting. Also, this week we got a new trailer for Amsterdam, a brand new 20th century film coming out. End of, I think it's beginning of November. This one's like a kind of like a buddy cop, like it's a bit of a weird one in terms of, I mean, the cast they've got for this is incredible, because you've got like Christian Bale, you've got Margot Robbie, to me, I watched this trailer, it's like, yep, I'd watch that. That looks like a great movie to watch. It will be for me when it arrives on Disney Plus here in the UK, which I'm guessing either just around Christmas or just after the New Year. In the US, is a little bit more complicated, obviously, this is probably one of the last few of the HBO deals that they've got right now, because that deal was supposed to end at the end of this year. So all new releases next year shouldn't have that whole issue to where they're going. But yeah, so I thought that one looked pretty good. What about you?
Yeah, I've watched most of the movies by this particular director, and they're generally very entertaining, although the range has been pretty high between the worst and the best. But like you said, the talent on this one is crazy, and the story looks entertaining enough. I think it's going to be more character driven than plot driven, but with that kind of cast, that's probably a good thing.
And it's kind of a topic I wanted to bring up today, and it's the title of the episode is along the lines of, does Disney Plus need to adjust its episode, the way it's doing its episodes for its Disney Plus series? We're now like, we're going into, we're nearly coming into year 3 in November. We've got multiple series out now, and the cracks are starting to show a little bit, I feel like, on some of the episode length, especially on the Marvel side, because they've been a little bit more stringent. We had WandaVision had 9 episodes, and She-Hulk is also going to have the same amount of episodes. But since that, all the other series have all kind of had 6 episodes. We saw with Obi-Wan Kenobi, we had the 6 episodes. The Book of Boba Fett had 7. So and then the Mandalorian,
5.
yeah, 4 if you don't, or 3 if you only count the ones with Mando in, and then obviously the Mandalorian had 8. So they've been messing around a little bit in terms of their series, but there seems to be a growing problem with the Marvel series, and I think Obi-Wan suffered from it as well, where trying to stretch out to get to that point of 6 episodes, the story's either not strong enough, or it then feels like they kind of, oh no, we've run out of time, we need to rush everything in this last episode. And yeah, it's like Miss Marvel this week with this episode, it kind of ended, and I'm like, this either needed to be much tighter, so it was a little bit better, or the opposite way of it needed more episodes to stretch out the story a little bit more. I think in some ways it feels like we're at the midway point and we've not even really got going yet in terms of Miss Marvel. Whereas the opposite happened with Obi-Wan Kenobi. A fan he's released a edit of the series, edited down to about 2.5 hours for a movie, and like even the trades have started picking up on how good this edit is, because it's like cut all the fluff out and it's turned Kenobi into like a really good movie because of the way they've cut it and stuff. And it's like, you can really, and there's been a lot more people complain, a lot more people just like going, trying to force everything into 6 episodes maybe it's not working. What do you think?
Yeah, with those specific examples, you can definitely see it. Like Obi-Wan, we talked about episode 6, and it's like, why are Beru and Owen fighting the Inquisitor at the end of this? This doesn't make sense. This is very clearly just, because we want to include them rather than for any story reasons. I have always been a advocate for the story should have as many episodes as it needs, and in many cases, it doesn't need that many. It's nice to have longer series, but more often than not, having a shorter, tight, focused series is going to be more satisfying than longer series. And of course, we've seen that with regular network television for years. The standard CW format, 22 episode for the Flash or Arrow, and by the time you get to the end of the season, you're like, you could have cut maybe 10 of those episodes out and not lost anything of value, and they all get padded and fluffy. But it goes the other way too. If you don't have enough episodes, like we're seeing with, say, Miss Marvel and even Moon Knight, you kind of like, oh, so episode 6, you're just kind of rushing through everything, and we still don't feel like we got everything that you needed to get through.
Yeah, I definitely felt like with Moon Knight, it was like we went into that final episode, and then suddenly it went from like it just speeded up. We got these big Khonshu battles, and it's like, what? Where did that all come from? There's a lot of people talk about like, people go, I want full seasons. I don't like these half season things. As a Brit, and I will say this, and I've said this 1,000 times, I am used to the 6 episode format. This is something I've grown up with on British television as standard. That is the standard length for most series. It's either, if you go above 6, you're generally going into continuous shows. So it's not very, we never did the whole 22 episode things. That was just something that never happened. So I don't mind the 6 episode thing. That doesn't bother me. I always felt like the Arrowverse episodes and like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. were too long. I remember distinctively with the Daredevil series on Netflix. They had some fluff episodes in the middle that just didn't need it. It's like we didn't need those episodes, and Defenders was a little bit better at the 8. But I also can look at like going, Miss Marvel either needed more to stretch it out a little bit because it could have done with a bit more, with the villains and everything, and just kind of giving them a bit more time. But also, like you say, you could tighten it up and go a little bit shorter. Also, I mean, some of the episode lengths, they are quite short sometimes, barely 30 odd minutes. And it's like certain things of it I like, and then there's certain things that go, well, they could have done that. I think especially like what we've just seen with Stranger Things season 4, where those episodes were bordering on being, I mean, I think the last episode of the finale was about 2.5 hours. I mean, they were too long episodes. They were too long episodes for what they are. They were fantastic. I really enjoyed that season. That was a really good season. But like one episode of the 2 episodes they dropped last was longer than the entire Obi-Wan Kenobi series combined. And there's this line, and I think streaming it, you can see where they're kind of going, we want 6 episodes. Well, don't maybe see how many episodes you've got when you've done the edit. Let's go from there rather than kind of, I don't know. It's just to me, it feels like the 6th episode, especially with the Marvel side, really needs a little bit more flexibility.
I agree. It needs more flexibility, but it does need to come at it from both sides. So corporate or whatever's happening really shouldn't be saying 6 episodes is what you're doing. If you've got a 5-episode story, tell it in 5 episodes. If you've got an 8-episode story, tell it in 8 episodes, and so on. But the creators aren't making the best use of their time either. That's one of the constrictions. You have 6 episodes, they're this long. Tell your story. And if you're getting to episode 6 and you're like, oh, we need to rush through all the plot points now because we forgot to pace for it properly, that's on you. That's your mistake as well. And so it's a give and take. Obviously, if you're writing a 3-episode series and then Marvel says, no, we need it to be 6 episodes, and now you've got to just throw a lot of fluff into it to get it up to 6, that's not really your fault. That's a corporate obligation. But if you know from the beginning it's 6 episodes, it's 8 episodes, 9 episodes, and you are running out of time at the end, that's bad pacing. That's bad writing. So.
I mean, let's look now at like what's coming up in August. So we know we've got Andor is going to be 12 episodes, and we know that She-Hulk is going to be 9 episodes. So they're all automatically we're in some, they're mixing things up a little bit. I think with She-Hulk it's because it's supposed to be a comedy series, so therefore they've gone with more shorter episodes. Might not be a bad thing. We don't know necessarily how long those Andor episodes are. Probably 40 minutes, I'm guessing around that as an average. But what they were doing with that series was they ended up filming them in like 3-episode blocks. And what they decided was that when they got to the end of, or when they kind of finished season 1, when they're going into season 2, which are going to be filming soon, they're going to be continuing on with that 3-episode block. But each block is going to be a specific year. So over the whole course of that second season, we're actually going to span 4 years. And it's basically, they're going to go from the end of season 1 right through to Rogue One in that. And so suddenly season 2 sounds like, oh, they've completely changed the entire format of how the episodes are going to work already. And you're kind of seeing now, like with Lucasfilm and with Marvel, they're probably learned a lot with these first few series. We're still in the early days of the making a series. I know why we think of Marvel, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Defenders, they didn't make, the Marvel Studios team didn't make them. Like WandaVision was their first series, and I'm wondering if we're going to start seeing them like expand a little bit on that.
Yeah, obviously the first 2 years have been, how do we do this? How is this different from making a Disney Channel show? How is this different from making a Marvel movie? What can we do that we couldn't do? And then obviously you throw in the chaos of COVID screwing around with, we can't do reshoots now, or we're almost done. We've got 2 episodes left to shoot, but now we're under all these restrictions. So that of course is on top of the normal randomness of it. But you do get the sense that they are starting to recognize what they can do with it. And they've also got the technologies that they're playing with too. The volume, or whatever they're calling it now, that was used in Mandalorian and used in several of these shows, is giving them opportunities they didn't have properly. And just like any technology, there are things that it is very good at doing, and there are things that it's not quite as good at doing. And they're starting to feel out what works and what doesn't with that technology. And then heck, you've got Andor, which is like, now we shot it on location out in England there and other locations, and we didn't use the volume at all.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely going to be ways of doing it. I mean, obviously they're filming now the Percy Jackson series up in Vancouver, and they're using the volume. And I'm hoping, I feel like in some ways, like 20th Television and Disney branded television and ABC, because they've been so entrenched in television for so long, I feel like they've got that much more experience. I never really felt like, like Big Shot or with Mighty Ducks was maybe a little bit different, but like the Benedict Society or High School Musical, you never felt that same way about it the same way you do with the Marvel and the Star Wars ones, because they've got that history of knowing how many episodes they've got, or how to edit it together, or how to put it together properly a little bit better.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't use Mighty Ducks, because that was one of the big complaints was you clearly were not able to shoot everything you wanted, and now you have to chop it up into any story at all, and it didn't quite work. But Big Shot, Benedict Society, those were very well put together, and it felt like there weren't too many artificial constraints on it coming from corporate, like in terms of length and size. It was, tell the story. You've got so many episodes, and then roll with it, and probably that more traditional feel, almost sitcom feel for at least Big Shot worked in their favor because they knew how to write sitcoms. That's the bread and butter of the vast majority of television channels, including Disney, for a long time. So they're just like, all right, we're going to do this sitcom style. This is this episode. This is this episode, and there will be a thread running through them, and that was it.
Yeah,
that's how they did it.
I also feel like, in some ways, like say for example, we're watching like the Orville right now, or there's those episodes are all almost like their own individual story. So they have a start, middle, and an end. You can watch that episode, and in all honesty, you might not have seen a single other episode of this entire series, and you'll still get a story. You'll still get, and I feel like Marvel and Star Wars, What If was the only one that we've really kind of seen that with. Whereas, they're trying to do this long story. Basically, it's a movie split up into parts, rather than kind of going, well, actually, yeah, we've got like season 2 of Miss Marvel. Well, episodes 1, 2, and 3 is one story, and then episodes 3, 4, they've not really gone down that line or trying to turn every episode. I know we joked a little bit like with Mandalorian of like Monster of the Week with some of the things, but in actual fact, that made it feel, you had an ending and you had a story, and like Marvel's not really kind of gone down that same line so much. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't necessarily want Monster of the Week all the time, but everything is constantly building, and I feel like in television, just the way that Marvel's doing it, isn't always going to be the way they do it.
They need to have the flexibility to do what works for each individual project. They might come along and they might do a damage control series where every week it's okay, this superhero battle happened over here, and we've got to come in and fix everything, and that's the episode. And then maybe there'll be some undercurrents like office tension, or various characters have their subplots, and those continue. But then the next episode, it's like, oh man, Hulk and Abomination got into a fight on the subway. All right, we're going to go and fix the subway, and that's the episode. And otherwise, there's no like connect between them, except that it's the same people doing them. And then there's other stories which is what they're doing now, which is where it's basically just a long form movie. You're just watching chunks of a very long movie every single week, or binging it at the end if that's your preferred style. And they need to be able to let both styles do their thing when it's appropriate for the story. Because like Moon Knight, Monster of the Week probably wouldn't work that well. First, he doesn't have a rogues gallery that's big enough to support that, and two, the story relies on the continual motion of the actual plot. But sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say like WandaVision and Moon Knight in some way had this thing of the what's going on, something crazy. We don't know what's happening next. Big there was especially WandaVision. They were making it for television. They knew why they were playing with the idea of having cliffhangers and all the rest of it. And like the later episode seasons haven't had that same, just dropping somebody walks on stage, a cameo. I mean, they've kind of avoided that in Miss Marvel and Moon Knight, but it was so noticeable. Or, for example, like in Hawkeye, and I don't know, it's so funny kind of looking back now. I think now we've got like a dozen plus shows to look at. You can kind of go, well, that worked and that didn't work, and I'm sure they're doing the same thing, but this straight up 6 episodes for the Marvel ones has been a bit problematic, especially in the last 2. Well, last 3, I would say.
I think it worked well enough for Hawkeye. There were definitely some issues where you could see they couldn't quite get the reshoots that they wanted to, but I would definitely agree with Moon Knight. Obviously, we still have 1 episode left of Miss Marvel, so we can't 100% say what's going on there, but I have a feeling next week we'll be talking about missed opportunities or wasting time on plots that we didn't really think went anywhere.
Alternatively, with the other way they could do it with Miss Marvel, actually don't finish it the story, just end it with a cliffhanger and go season 2 here 2023, bang, just don't try and rush it. Just actually go, no, we're going to leave it open, and we've got multi-season arc here, and leave it open. It's not necessarily going to be like Netflix where they cancel it, but the ratings on Miss Marvel are far lower than on any other one, so there might be less pressure on them to bring it in the future. But in some ways, it's an issue.
That might also work in its favor, though. Presuming it gets a season 2, and I think it probably will. If it's lower ratings now, which it is, they might be willing to just go, you know what? It's not a super rating powerhouse. Writers, creators, you've got more leeway to do your thing because there's less riding on it. And you typically do see that kind of thing with the lower rated shows where eventually corporate's just like, you know what, we're not making the money we want off this, but we make enough money for it to keep going. Have fun, go crazy, do your thing. Whereas if you're doing like an Obi-Wan season 2, right now it doesn't look like it will be, but say you were, Lucasfilms in this case is definitely going to be up in there, making sure that you're not going to do anything to disrupt the branding. You're not going to do anything to do long-term damage to Star Wars. You're going to do things that are nice and marketable and can give you action figures and T-shirts and things like that, because it's the big one. It's the one that everyone's watching. And that's the double-edged sword of it. Because on the one hand, you're working on this huge property. You're working with Ian McGregor. You're working with Hayden Christensen. You're working with all these guys. And on the other hand, you've got Disney breathing down your neck to make sure you do not screw it up. But if you're working on Big Shot or you're working on Benedict Society, there's a lot less pressure on you, and you can kind of have freedom to do some fun things with it.
I definitely feel like, I mean, there's been some other complaints from the other side. I know, like with, say, for example, like a Searchlight Pictures film or a 20th Century Studios film where, you know, a 2.5-hour movie is then stretched out to a limited series. And it's been happening a lot with loads of other shows where everything now becomes a limited, 6-8 part series. And, like The Dropout had a little bit of fluff in there. It could have been squeezed down if that was a movie. I don't know necessarily about Dope Sick, because that needed that little bit more time. But they probably could have cut out some, but they probably would have just cut out what the girl story. They would have done something with it and just like trimmed it down a little bit. But it kind of feeds over it. But I generally feel like I think the Marvel and the Star Wars ones, there's so much pressure on them, like you say, because they are the powerhouses of Disney Plus and what are bringing people in. Yeah.
And like I said, way back at the beginning, you really need to tell the story in a format that fits the story. Like you mentioned Dope Sick. I think that absolutely needed to be a miniseries because they did a very good job of showing the progression of how bad things were going and how every step of the way they could have taken a step back and gone, oh, no, we're really screwing with people's lives here. Maybe we should take this back to the drawing board. But they double down and go, no, profits are 3 times higher and we're pushing it, etc. And you get this sense every single episode of things just getting worse and the epidemic progressing. And it worked really well. You would not get that in an 1.5, 2-hour movie.
No.
Whereas
maybe like Pam and Tommy could have quite easily been squeezed down to like a 2-hour plus movie.
Easily. I mean, that's not to say that I wasn't happy to have the extra length of it, because it was a very fun series and it let the actors and actresses just kind of go wild with the story. But yeah, it could have been a 2-hour movie and almost nothing of important value lost. That's not to say you wouldn't have lost things, but the core of the story would have still been there, intact, perfectly fine.
Yeah, and Pistol is another recent example of another series that you could have seen that as a movie, but it's been extended out. And again, I think they just need that little bit more freedom of, there's nothing, I think the trouble is if they turn around and say, right, okay, we've got, I don't know, this brand new Marvel series or a brand new Star Wars series. Oh, it's only got 4 episodes and they're an hour each. People are like, oh, that's not enough. I want a full season. I don't like all this. And I especially feel like American audiences with being so trained with that longer episode format. I mean, like look at what we had with Sherlock. We'd only get 3 episodes in a season of an 1.5 each. That was it, and they were great. And that was kind of standard. I think that's the way. Again, there's a slight difference in how I will look at it. That maybe to like you.
No, I actually tend to go more with the British mentality on this. I prefer the shorter series. But you're not wrong. Most Americans are in with the 13-episode or the 22-episode format. And if you don't get the 22 episodes, you feel kind of like, oh, you didn't give me everything that I got in our bargain, even though I'm not actually paying you for the bargain or anything like that. But
yeah, wait
yeah.
to they visit the UK, and then they ask for a large. You go, oh, that's a small. It goes with everything over.
Yeah, it's not just a television thing. It's definitely food portions and car sizes and everything.
I distinctly remember being in a Burger King in New York, and it was really hot, really thirsty. My friend asked for, they asked like, what soda and stuff, and he's like, oh yeah, whatever the biggest is you've got. When we're thinking like, oh, I'd like biggest here. He brings out this bucket. It wouldn't have been so bad, but he then knocked it all over me.
Ooh.
So I had to go back to the hotel and get changed because it was just like a bucket of cola. And it's just like, I'm like, why would you give anybody a bucket of cola?
And then you'll have other people who will come in there and say, like, this little, I don't know, 24 ounce, that's too piddly. 24 ounces of soda. How am I supposed to survive? Like, do you have any idea how much soda 24 ounces? That's huge. But no, that's like the small.
But no, it's interesting to see how all this works. I feel like Disney and Marvel and Lucasfilm, they're all going to be looking at the data, looking at how it's, looking at the feedback, looking at how the editing and stuff gone, feedback from the people that are making it, and going from there. And as I said, things will change as they move on. We've got upcoming things like Werewolf by Night, which hopefully will be officially revealed soon. Like one special, one episode and done. They are trying out some different things, but hopefully, I mean, to be honest, really, at the minute, we know after She-Hulk, that's it for pretty much 2022 in terms of live series. And that might, give us an idea then of what happens like with Secret Invasion and stuff. They might have some different ideas, but let us know what you think. Do you think the 6-episode format is working for the Marvel series, or would you like to see a little bit more flexibility? We'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Right. Okay, let's now jump into some of the reviews. But before we do that, quick hello and shout out to all of our supporters on Patreon and YouTube channel members. They help support the channel each and every month for as little as $2. They also get to take part in the weekly Q&A. They also get their support. So a big thank you to Paul. We've also got Daniel, Elliot, Aero, Caleb, Red Marsman, Cody, Chris, Jacob, Darren, Lauren, Sarah, the Juice, Andrew, and then over on the YouTube's Mahmoud, Raphael, Adam, Dana, Ricky, Dave, My VCR Still Works, Bina, Joshua, Dawn, Martin, Jeremy, and also a huge thank you to Sarah for your support at the executive level. Right, let's talk now. We might as well start off with Miss Marvel. What did you think of this week's episode?
I enjoyed it quite a bit, actually. It was a nice little change of pace to spend time with these other two characters for a bit to kind of establish stuff that probably should have been established earlier in the show, but finally getting to it and then having an episode which was more just about fixing things and talking to people, not so much the superhero stuff. And I was particularly happy with Kamala and her mom and her grandma finally just having a proper conversation, and most of the cards being on the table, even if Kamala's still not, revealing everything. At least the big secrets are now just kind of like, oh, yep, those are out there. Learn how to deal with them.
Yeah, see, I was kind of in the opposite direction of this series of just like this episode was just like, what was the point? What literally the last 3 minutes was the only thing. It's just like, so they went back in time and there's this whole story with her. It's like, well, doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. It has no bearing on Miss Marvel, like on the character at all. When I played the Avengers video game, Grandma was never mentioned. She was never, I didn't need her story for I don't know. It's a really, really struggling with this series of it just feels like it's just gone downhill ever since she jumped in that car after being chased by Damage Control. Of just like, well, what was the point of this whole story for 20 odd minutes of her great grandmother running around? Or just like, it doesn't matter. It was, and then just like Kamala helping her gran find her dad was like, why are we doing time travel? This doesn't have any bearing of where I don't know. And the villains were just they're just so dull. They've just been I'm just not enjoying like this last couple episodes are just like, oh, come on, where are we going with this? I don't know. It's the series has really struggled from not having a strong villain. It's not had a reason to do, they kind of hinted at some kind of inhuman thing with some rocks, getting powers, and they didn't get powers. And, I don't know. I've just, it's like, for me, the series is like, I was really enjoying it. And it's just been like, okay, it's like the finale's coming up. And I'm like, I'm hoping that they actually don't finish it properly. I hope they just don't rush through it. I mean, this whole thing with this other dimension of just like, it's just too complicated. Like, now the sun's got powers. Like, I don't know. It's just all over the place. I mean, it's like they're going to have they two are then going to have a fight? Well, they've had no meaning to have a fight for the last 5 episodes. So why would they still? I don't know. I'm just really like, I'm just not enjoying it the same way that I have the other ones. The last 2 episodes have just been so dull.
I think the core problem has been that the series isn't really sure what story it wants to tell in that regard. And obviously, the way you're talking, you want it to have more of a proper superhero conflict with a villain that it would not necessarily emphasize with, but at least find interesting and understand their motives, and why do we want them to fail and Kamala to succeed? And on the other hand, we've also got this just general coming of age story about a young Pakistani woman in America, her current cultural interests coming into conflict with, her religious cultural influences and stuff like that. And the 2 stories just don't meet up at all.
Yeah. I mean, it's I was going to say, like, from a superhero point of view, like you say, that you have your hero and your villain. That's your core story, and a good villain will make a series or a movie even better. But a bad one will generally just, the ones that people don't like the most, the movies, are the ones with bad villains. If you're going to do a superhero series, you have to either commit to the villain or not. And in this case, it's like you've got one, but you've made it a bit wishy-washy. Like, you didn't need it. Maybe they didn't need them being chased down, and that whole aspect to it, just, I don't know, it's very, like you said, the whole coming of age thing and the thing with the family and the issues with her mother and grandmother. That's the interesting stuff, because that's like, oh, that's new and a bit different. And then it's like, well, then got this just generic villains thing on the side, which just doesn't work. This bit over here just, it's not as fun. When you've got the grandmother and the mum like talking and some real honest stuff going, that's the nice bit. That's the stuff I'm really enjoying. It's just the standard like superhero stuff is just low. We're in like CW area.
Yeah, and that's where the things are coming apart. And I'm kind of just overlooking the villain stuff as, this is genre convention. They're doing it because it's a Marvel show and we're expected to have a fight. There were plenty of episodes of Agents of Shield or Arrow or Flash where it's literally like, we're having a fight because that's what we do in this kind of show. It'd be like having an episode of Power Rangers where the Power Rangers never show up and it's just the kids having a conversation. Like, that's not what I'm watching for. I think that if they had ditched this current set of villains that they had up until the end of this episode, just not made them villains at all, because it doesn't even seem like they're supposed to be villains. They're supposed to be characters on a quest, and Kamala either interferes or helps with them, but otherwise we're not talking about like Doctor Doom or something like that. They would have been much better off taking damage control and having them be like this mysterious influence in the background, maybe with some undertones of like, is damage control misguided but otherwise have good ideas, or are they maybe subtly racist because they're dealing with Muslims and things like that? And that would have been a much more interesting story.
Yeah.
And I really wish they had focused on that. And that looks like where they're going with episode 6, because the core villains are done now, and now the only thing left is for damage control to come and try and arrest Kamala, because
and
I don't know.
And you also had this whole other thing of like Red Hood or Red Dagger and the other guy of like, well, why do we need both them and the clandestines at the same time? Kind of introduce, like, you could have done that with one of them. You didn't need both of them and you could have held them off maybe for season 2. And like you say, the damage control hasn't been an issue because of the last 3 episodes, when they would have been a much more interesting villain, because they're just the authorities. They misunderstand what's going on, and it's just a very all over the place. It just seems to be like we're just throwing spaghetti against the wall to find what will work. And I don't know, it's a very strange little series. I know we've still got the finale to go, but my gut feeling is like, well, I've not enjoyed the last 3 episodes. That's not a good. I mean, I've not even been sat there at like 8 o'clock in the morning. I've got to watch this. I don't know if it was because Kenobi took that up at the beginning of the series, and I just got disconnected a little bit. But it was a bit like, both. I think the last 2 episodes I didn't watch till the next day. I've never done that with a Marvel series because I was just like, I'll watch it, because I think had this been a DC show, I just wouldn't have returned, and I think that's what the problem would have been.
Yeah, I mean, there might be a certain amount of I'm watching this because I have to talk about it for the podcast in the week, and in your case, like the daily updates and things like that, and that's fine. You know, I can see why this is getting a little bit less viewership than others. It is missing the mark that it's aiming for, and that's why I think Damage Control as a villain throughout the series, rather than kind of end noting it and book noting it, having it at the beginning and then having it at the end, and forgetting to talk about them at all in the last 3 episodes until the very end, was a mistake. Plus, they fit more thematically with the internal struggle that Kamala has towards the beginning of the series. Like, am I American? Am I Muslim? Am I Pakistani? And so on. It fit more with that, and they just kind of ignored that. And like, yeah, okay, here's your ancestor. Here are these random people who we will never see again because they're now all gone. That we don't know what their personality was, or their motives or anything. And we were only doing this because everything has to be epic. Everything has to be the end of the world. And we've talked about that plenty of times in the past. Where it's like, no, sometimes it doesn't need to be the end of the world. It just needs to be the end of your world or the end of your local area.
I mean, I suppose it's about the whole other thing as well. Like, they got turned into skeletons, and then the thing closed. Well, okay. And then they just walked off, and she went off and had a quick chat with, a potential new boyfriend. And it was just like, this whole opening up the thing was supposed to just destroy the end. Now, whether or not there's a whole other subplot going on that they've not talked about, and that is going to change what's going on. But I don't know. It's a very strange series. And like you say, viewership is drastically down on the normal Marvel series. I can tell it as well. Excitement, like discussion in like the Facebook group and in the comments and stuff, just the lowest I've seen for any of the. Again, is Marvel misread this character? I know some people obviously don't want to watch it because they feel it's kiddish. And it's like, I don't really feel like it's a kid's show. I don't feel like it's any different tone, especially in the last few episodes. But yeah, it's just very strange how this series is kind of like hit that point with Marvel of just like going, not everything they're doing is hitting, and this one's like not is like missed a bit.
I think it has missed a little bit, but some of the problems we're talking about existed in the other shows as well, where there was kind of a lack of focus, or why are you including this aspect to it? And Miss Marvel, of course, has other things going on too. It's targeted at a younger audience, so a lot of adults are just like, I'm not interested in a teen show, even if it is Marvel. It's got the element of she's not your typical white American boy or man, and there's a whole lot of baggage that comes along with that. And there's unfortunately a very large section of people who are just going to like, yeah, no, I'm not watching something that's not directly me, that I can't insert myself into, which is, dumb, but I can't stop people from thinking that. And so I think there's a whole lot of factors other than just story involved here. And Disney and Marvel certainly were aware of it. Marvel saw the pushback when they first started publishing the Miss Marvel comics in the first place, and oh my god, you guys are going so woke, and why is there a Muslim city, blah blah blah. And of course we're getting it all again. So they knew that was coming.
It's almost like say what happened when the book and like was it the new all different era, and right now we've literally got Miss Marvel, Mighty Thor, less so with Miles Morales. You know, we're having all of this stuff almost play out for a second time but I think they've done it a much better way in how they handled it for these ones than they did with the comic books. But it is strange because I think the whole thing with Miss Marvel being and the Muslim family, I think that's what's made this show so much interesting and so much more fresh and great, because I've enjoyed. Same thing with Moon Knight. I've enjoyed that being, and maybe it's that kind of thing like, well, I'm kind of we've seen we've seen everything else before. This is nice to have something fresh and something different, which is what I really like. But not, as you said, not everyone's been quite as open for that.
Yeah. I have been enjoying it more, but I'm 100% aware that there are problems. And like I said at the beginning, I think that the villains that they did through from episodes like 3 through 5 weren't needed at all. I would have really preferred them just going all in on damage control as the bad guys. Again, whether well-meaning but misguided, or actually, not that well-meaning and maybe influenced overtly or subtly by racist tendencies they might not even know they have. But that's not the way they went. There's definitely a lot of questions that we're just not going to get answered because the writing decided to be kind of all over the place. It would have been better focused. We'll see how it wraps up. I hope that it's not just another situation of let's wrap up all the plot points and go home. So we'll see.
My other problem as well is, like, are they leading? And this problem that Marvel has as well of mirror villains, where, like, he's now got the same power that she's got, and then they're going to fight, and it's just they're too similar. The conflict of that might be an issue, but we're gonna have to wait and see. Let's see how next week's episode goes. So we'll speak about that on next week. But let us know in the comments below what you think. Okay, so let's now talk about some of the other quick series that have been out this past week. So we had the third episode of Only Murders in the Building drop on Disney Plus around the world and on Hulu in the US on Tuesday. What did you think of this episode?
It was okay. It felt like an odd tangent. I know they had to do it because it adds a lot of context, but I didn't really enjoy spending an entire episode with Bunny.
It wasn't the nicest of characters, is she?
No, and I get it. You need to add some context. You have to give us a reason to care about her, especially since they spent most of the season, kind of last season, tearing her down and being. She's not the villain, but she's definitely an antagonist, and she's not a very happy person. And we stabbed her to death, and this is why you should care. And like, okay, you gave us an interesting backstory for her, kind of tangled in. There's obviously going to be a lot of threads. We probably don't even know her threads yet, but it's also like, just because I know why she was the way she was doesn't mean she wasn't the way she was, and still doesn't grate on me, or still grates on me either way.
But I thought it was okay. I thought it was a nice, like, just building up the character, showing us what happened beforehand, and just building up this whole, setting the tone for when the murder actually happens. This is the thing with these episodes, because also, they flip and turn and stuff. But this is, again, it's a much better format for an episode because there's kind of a start and an end. You kind of know where they're going with it.
Yeah,
I thought it was pretty good.
Although, if I remember correctly from season 1, there were a couple cliffhanger episodes, even in the middle. Not necessarily cliffhanger, like how are they going to get out of this situation, but more like, ooh, we just dropped a bombshell on you, and you're going to have to wait 7 days to find out what it is. But there is a much more clear-cut formatting for this one.
Also, we had a new episode of Orville. That one dropped on Thursday. So this one ended up sending, can't think of the guy, the guy with the beard, the
pilot.
The pilot. So he ends up getting sent back in time, and then they go back in time to try and bring him back. But he's ended up kind of set up life with the kids and all the rest of it, and kind of make that decision to kind of go basically erase them from time. And it's a very weird episode because there's this whole thing of like time travel and the ethics of time travel, and the whole thing of it was and the kind of the end bit of the guy's lost his 2 kids and his wife, and the old the original the one from 10 years ago obviously doesn't care because he doesn't do it, but there was so much emotion with him, like basically like, you're not taking away my family, you can't take away my kids and stuff, and I don't the rules and stuff don't exist. You've left me here for 10 years. I've moved on and I've got a family. And it's again, this series is just continuing that trend of really hitting some hard hitting issues that they need to. But it was a good episode.
Yeah, I've not seen the episode. I'm planning on watching it today, so I can't really comment on it. I will say, time travel has been a big thing in the Star Trek shows lately, and crossing dimensions and blah blah blah. And Star Trek is so tangled with time travel now that I can't even take their episodes on it seriously, because like, oh, we're going back in time. Make sure you wave out the window to Spock in Star
Yeah.
Trek 4 or whatever while we're going. Yeah, but the Orville has the potential, and I hope it was realized in this episode, to properly do an actual story with time travel.
Yeah, it's just showing you like why, you know, the effect and stuff from it. But yeah, no, it's pretty good. You got to watch America the Beautiful. What did you think of this?
I did.
One?
Well, I watched the first 2 episodes. I've not seen the whole thing. Beautiful photography. The actual documentary aspect of it is fine. I know that you had issues with, you know, the little side quips of like, oh, the alligator's hungry, but it's not going to get the food today, and so stuff like that. I have no problem with that. The core problem I had with it was they kept speeding up and slowing down the footage. Like, they've got these great sweeping landscape shots. They're clearly shot in a helicopter, and they're just speeding up. And like, no, let me enjoy the scenery. That's the point. I want to see the scenery. Yeah. And they're talking about how great the scenery is. Like, yeah, I can't see it anymore. It's back there now.
Yeah.
And then other shots with the animals are like, all right, we're going to go down to 5 frames per second. You're going to see every single motion. Like, okay, I get why they do this in, like, you know, Blue Planet and Life and stuff, but you missed the point. You're supposed to show the action scenes in slow motion so you can see how fast things are going. You're not supposed to show the frog hopping through the forest at 5 frames per second. And like, it really was bothering me.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's a solid show. There's a few little issues of how they've done it, but again, it's always a weird thing with these shows with National Geographic. I'd love to know the actual viewership of what these ones are, of like where is it moving the needle, and whether or not Disney at some point down there go, we keep making these things and no one's watching. It's just like they're not pulling in, you know, how much is that episode? How much is this going to cost us? Yeah, they ain't going to get enough viewers. It's like, some of them are cheap to make. I mean, like the Little Farm or something like that. I can get that, but you look at these kind of ones and going, I can see, especially with Nat Geo stuff, why probably, in all honesty, most of the shows need to be like on linear and on streaming to make it worth the effort of spending on it.
Well, yeah, and the main point of these isn't for you to necessarily watch them as they drop. They're there to be resources for schools, and for, you know, a couple of weeks from now, you're just like, I want to see something about this subject, and they've got a documentary on Machu Picchu, and I wanted to read, so there it is. But you're not necessarily sitting there going, oh, they're dropping the Machu Picchu documentary, and this is what I've been waiting 3 years to watch. It's different. You're not doing the Obi-Wan, you're not doing Miss Marvel. Obviously we are, but it's mostly for, you know, review purposes. They're back catalog items, and you're not going to see this huge spike of like 3 million viewers watched it on opening weekend. It's going to be more like, over the course of 4 years, the viewership actually evens out with the other things. And again, some of that is going to be classroom viewing. Some of it's going to be, you know, going to the library and them having a movie night, and they show the lions and the tigers and things like that. And National Geographic understands. They've been in the business for a very long time. BBC understands it when they do things like Planet Earth. And it's just different expectations for a different format. And definitely, at least in the States, do not underestimate that the classroom viewing, because these kind of things get shown all the time. Teachers are like, yep, we're taking a day off and we're watching this episode here. And the teacher is enjoying the day off, and the kids are enjoying the day off, and they're learning things whether they want to or not.
You can just imagine this teacher's just sat there and like,
I don't have to imagine.
It's just like, I could do a whole lesson plan. I could just let them watch the episode, and that will fill the 50 minutes. Here's some worksheets that they've made for me.
And I mean, yeah, literally, they do that. They distribute these materials, and like, if you want to have a quiz afterwards, here are the topics, or even here is a quiz template for you to use. And no matter what you think of the narration, there were definitely things in it where you learn what's going on. I learned things from this. And I went into a kind of younger audience. I probably know most of the stuff. I'm like, oh, all right. Didn't know that about the size of the American alligator, or, you know, what's the biggest, what's the smallest kind of thing. And it is educational. American documentaries have a different style than British documentaries. Depending on the mood, I prefer one or the other. Heck, I even prefer watching like lectures sometimes. Don't even need the documentary. Just tell me facts. But This is aimed at a younger audience. It's got some beautiful photography. It's got some missteps in it, but overall, it's still a solid National Geographic documentary. I don't say you have to go and watch it right now because it's going to be there for a long time. If you want to have something on that's a little bit educational, this is a good one to have on.
And I kind of, because they've been doing it with these documentaries. They've been doing the binge drop for them pretty much for a lot longer because they've obviously found that the weekly drop wasn't working for it. But in some ways, I feel like this series could have really benefited maybe from having them as a weekly drop because it would have put a little bit more focus on them. Because it was like gone, done, boom, and I'm like, because I was even thinking, oh yeah, that got released on Monday. Wow, I completely forgot. I was like, that was a week ago. This is but if it was a new episode drop, they would keep bringing it up into the news cycle and stuff. So it would have been, because that's how they did it originally. But then I think they just realized the viewing numbers just weren't working for those kind of shows.
Also, it doesn't really make sense for those kind of shows because episode 1 really doesn't have any connection to episode 2. Episode 2 doesn't have any connection to episode 3. They're all shot in North America. That's the connection. But otherwise, episode 1, there's a heavy emphasis on frogs and alligators and wetland creatures. And then they dip into the prairies for a bit and talk about the weather. And then episode 2, there's no plot threads for them to pick up. It's not like we saw this prairie dog over in episode 1 and it was snowing and then it was raining. And now we're going to see where it's at now. It's like, no, they're on completely different animals in a completely different biome.
Because it's almost kind of weird because it's almost like episode 1 is like a highlight reel of episodes 3 to 6. That's kind of how it kind of worked out. But no, it's good. I mean, I think it's a good series. I mean, my little issues with the narration are, that's literally what it is. It wasn't made the show impossible to watch. It wasn't like a Disney nature show where I was just like, after 10 minutes, I can't take this anymore. Or in some case, I'm just going to mute it and just have it, and it will look good.
I wouldn't mind them releasing these as a track with no narration at all. You get the background audio, you get the animal sounds, and that's it. I think that would be fascinating. But yeah, if you're coming into this with the mentality of like the David Attenborough stuff, it's going to be a bit of a tone shift because these are definitely aimed at an audience where you're kind of going with we got to talk a little cutesy. We got to add a narrative to the story. Attenborough, they're normally things like we've got the lion and we've got the zebra, and I'm just going to let it happen. I'm not going to make you root for one side or the other. Whereas this one is definitely like, ooh, the little critter, better be careful because the predator's going to get it. Don't root for the predator. Okay, it's nature. And to be fair, though, they did have sequences like the grizzly bear catching up with the baby, I think it was an elk. And it's like, oh, yeah, that is no longer a baby elk. That is dinner.
Lunch, yes.
Yeah.
So no, that was on there. There was also a Mickey Mouse short, The Wonderful Summer of Mickey Mouse. I did watch it. It was okay. I'm not a fan of this. I like the art style in some ways, and then other times they make really weird faces, and it really throws me off. Yeah.
Goofy bothers the heck out of me.
And also, it felt a little bit long. I know that's what they've done with this one. I remember getting about 10 minutes in going, okay, I'm kind of done on this one. Haven't got around to watching Assembled yet. It wasn't high on my list on Friday because it was just, it's been one of those things. But now let's jump into the main review for the day, the final one. And so we're going to be talking about Thor: Love and Thunder. So we're going to do a little bit sort of spoiler free before, and then once we'll let you know with the spoilers. So what did you think of Thor: Love and Thunder?
Definitely enjoyed it quite a bit. I'm going to have to sit and ponder on it for a while. I'm thinking right now, not quite as high as Ragnarok, but still, in that same area. And if you remember way back to our review of Ragnarok, I actually wasn't like super into it the first time. I still liked it, but it was like, it was good, but not great. And then it evolved over time to where it's like, oh, actually, I appreciate the things that they set up here. And we'll see if that happens with Love and Thunder. I was about to say Love and Ragnarok.
Yeah.
That would be a different movie entirely.
But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Now I've got to say, this was a bit of a different one for me because I got invited up by Marvel to the premiere in London, so headed up to the premiere, and so we were in a big IMAX. And this was actually, I think, the first time I've seen a movie in proper IMAX. I mean, there's this massive screen from top to bottom, really nice, comfortable seats. Taika Waititi, also Tessa Thompson and Natalie Portman did actually come out and talk to us and kind of do like a quick Q&A just before it. So kind of obviously at that point of like, I'm in this massive theater that, you know, outside was the red carpet with all the fireworks going off. You know, there's a buzz of things here. We got to do some photo opportunities. So therefore you're like, okay, you are in a heightened, like, this is just lovely, you know, and it was like, and then I was obviously watched the film and I was just in fits. I was just laughing all the way through. Taika's comedy completely hit with me. I like his comedy style in this movie. All his jokes I laughed at, and I thought it was humorous. And I think that is the thing with this film, is if you like his comedy, you're great. If you don't like his comedy, it's because I've seen quite a few people like, oh, I didn't like it. It's not as good. And I'm like, did you guys see the same movie I did? Because I love this movie. This was just like, this is a big summer blockbuster. You know, I did say to someone, it's got flying goats in it. Let's just put you know, there's a whole thing of like, you know, this did this. It's got flying goats. You can't take it seriously. It's like there's that kind of. I feel sometimes that we get a little bit like caught up in overthinking it. It's like it's a movie about a Norse god with flying goats that pulls a you know, and it's just like
ride.
a theme park ride. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of jokes and it's a lot of, if you're after something serious, a serious, you know, gritty like superhero series like The Boys or Justice League, this isn't it. This is just fun superhero madness. And you know, Gore was great in it. I just loved the whole aspect with like with Tessa. I thought, you know, Valkyrie was really good in this one. What the sort of the Mighty Force, I mean, I enjoyed the comic book story. I feel like they played it quite simple. It worked. And I've never been a huge fan of Natalie Portman. I like in some of her stuff, but generally she's not like something like, oh, that I'll watch it because she's in it. She was fine in it. She was probably the best I think she's been. She seemed a bit more likable in this than, because I feel like in Dark World she was just so miserable. She was like, well, just why are we bothering with her? Because she doesn't seem that interesting. Where she did seem a little bit more, you know. There was, you know, she had, when she was Mighty Thor, she obviously had a little bit more fun with it. And then, you know, when she was ill, I thought that worked quite well as a whole.
Yeah, we'll save discussion of that towards the spoiler portion. But yeah, Natalie Portman did a great job. Actually, all the actors and actresses, I couldn't point to anyone that was like, oh, why this was a miscast or anything like that. It's solid. I think if you liked Ragnarok, you will like this. I think that's what it really boils down. If you did not like Ragnarok, or if you're kind of on Ragnarok, probably not the same. It is important to note that it is a very funny movie, but as is true with a lot of Taika's shows and movies, it can hit you in the feelings sometimes, where he is very good at getting that balance between them. It does miss a couple of points though, and we'll talk about those in the spoilers, but.
So I think it's only fair now. I think the thing is, if you haven't seen the movie and you don't want any spoilers, at this point on, we're going to go into some bit more spoilery issues on it. So, yeah, let's jump into the spoilers of Thor Ragnarok. There are obviously some aspects to this one which I like the fact that they did finish. They kind of followed through on the idea that, you know, that Jane Foster, you know, she had cancer and she died. Wasn't so keen on the end credit scene, but I understand, you know, they kind of got to leave on a good note, and, you know, and she's not gone, but she's gone. But I did think that worked quite well the way they did it.
Well, I mean, the whole idea of Valhalla was in a continual point that they mentioned throughout the movie. You know, even right from the beginning, they're like, Jamie as Sif shows up and is like, it's fine, I'm dying, let me go to Valhalla. And so, like, yeah, you didn't actually meet the requirements, maybe you should come back with me and try that again. And this is a continual thing that's mentioned, where if you're a Viking, if you're a part of the Asgardian culture, Valhalla is what you want in the end. Everything you're doing towards life is to get you into Valhalla. So it kind of puts a little pin under it and goes, yes, the things that you did, the mightiness that you did, earned you the place. And it was nice to see Heimdall there as well, to kind of get that confirmation that Heimdall was there. And yeah, the character's dead. Valhalla is a very definitive, you are dead. But it's nice to have the closure. Yeah, that's what it's going for.
I think some people have like misread that as like they can bring her back. It's like, well, it's not. That
Well,
wasn't really the point of that. It was more just to set it up, really, that she's not really gone.
to go into the comic side of things, after she died in the comics, she was brought back as a Valkyrie, so
Yeah.
as part of Valkyrie's group. And I think, knowing that a lot of people are kind of assuming, okay, well, we're setting her up to become a Valkyrie in Thor 5 or Guardians 3 or something like that, and she will return. I hope they don't, honestly. I mean, I really like her as Valkyrie in the comics. I think there's a very good arc with her, but especially now with the multiverse stuff coming in a lot, and alternate dimensions and different timelines and stuff, like, no, you really need to make sure that dead means dead. You do not want to undercut the death of characters in the core universe, because like that was one of the things with Doctor Strange. Like, killed Reed Richards and we killed Black Bolt and we killed Captain Marvel, but it doesn't count for anything because it's an alternate reality. You do not want that it doesn't count for anything to come into the core reality too. That's
and I
important.
also get the feeling that maybe Natalie Portman is kind of done with the franchise, and therefore this is just, she can go off on her own. But I thought that was pretty cool. I also like the other post-credit scene, obviously with Zeus not dying, but also more importantly introducing Hercules,
that was particularly hilarious to me because I had just finished watching Ted Lasso over on Apple Plus a couple weeks ago, and I was like, "That's Roy Kent. Roy Kent. What is Roy Kent doing there?" I know that doesn't mean anything to you since you haven't seen it.
Everyone was cheering, and this is the thing of everyone was going, "I got no idea who he is."
Yeah, no,
I had to Google him when I got home.
No, it's very. I can't speak for your audience, obviously, but for me, very specifically, it was. It's this very beloved character in Ted Lasso that he plays. He's a football star, kind of on a British football, so we're talking soccer, star who is washed up at the end of his career, and he has a very interesting story arc, and the actor plays it really well. And it's like, it's a very different character for Hercules, but I'm very excited to see you as Hercules, so I hope this actually goes somewhere.
Yes, well, I mean, just setting that. I mean, I thought Zeus, he was so funny. I was not expecting it. I mean, his accent was a bit all over the place. But and I mean, it's just like I mean, the whole thing of just like, I mean, if anyone was watching it and then they kind of go, and he goes, "No orgies," just that's like,
not the thing you expect Russell Crowe to say. I will say, especially at the beginning of his career, around the time of Gladiator and stuff, he definitely had I am Russell Crowe. This is how I act. There is very much a Russell Crowe presence that is the same no matter what movie. He could be Maximus. He could be, a police detective. He could be whatever. And it's the same character, just in different time. This was a different character. His take on Zeus was unlike anything I've seen Russell do up to this point. And I was just like, all right, yes, I'm in for this. And I obviously that end credit sequence shows he's not dead, and we can expect him to show up in whatever Hercules does. I'm looking forward to seeing him again.
Yeah, I like the whole thing because it wasn't where I was expecting it to go. The whole thing of they go and try and get help from them, and I'm like, no, we don't want, we're not getting involved. He can kill us. Kind of thing. It's just like, if he doesn't know how to get it, we don't have to worry about it. And I was just like, oh, interesting, kind of like, because it didn't really. I think there'd been like obviously a lot of worry about what was going to happen, like with Moon Knight, with the gods and stuff, and like everyone was like no, they completely just sidestepped that completely. Just it doesn't have any bearing on Eternals. And I mean, there was like Celestials. At one point, it was like, is that Galactus? It was like, no, it's not. It's like, I'm gonna have to wait till I watch it again on Disney Plus to kind of go, who's that?
Yeah, I might actually catch this again in theaters towards the end of its run. When in a nearly empty theater on like a Tuesday night or something like that. I think it was good enough that I could go and do that. I have not done that with any of the releases thus far, so this is the first one.
I think it's because you've only got to wait maybe 6 weeks. It's not quite the same, is it?
No.
But no, I really enjoyed it. I thought all the comedy bits hit. Chris Hemsworth is just there's just something when he's on screen that just pulls me in. And just like, okay, he's funny. He just grabs every scene. There was a few bits. I mean, the whole bit I could have done without him doing the splits. Well, that bit was a bit stupid. But the other bits of it,
yeah, the splits were a little too over the top. Like, okay, and they stayed on it for so long. The Guardians going like, come on, what are you doing? And then it's just like, can we end this scene? Let's go.
Yeah, the Guardians were like a bit like they didn't really need them. They were, but then it also that even the way that they played off on the fact of like, like, we don't really want you around either when we're going.
Well,
they just generally just like along the lines of like, yeah, they really weren't big fans of Thor by the looks of it.
no, and I suspect that little story bit really was not something Taika wanted to explore. He was saddled with it. Kind of,
Yeah.
I'll always go back to the classic Back to the Future and Back to the Future Part 2. When they made Back to the Future, they didn't realize there was going to be a sequel, so they did the whole where we're going, we don't need roads, and like, oh, what's cool. And then when they got to sitting down and making Back to the Future Part 2, it's like, why did I do that? I'm railroading myself into a story I don't actually want to tell. And you get that kind of impression where it's like, yep, we ended Endgame and Thor's off with the Guardians of the Galaxy, and Taika like, I don't actually want to do a story with the Guardians of the Galaxy, and so he shuffled off. But I did appreciate that they at least talked about that they had been together for a while, so there are stories with them, and they built a camaraderie. And when Thor probably shows up in Guardians 3, at least there's that. Yeah, there's that scene too. To be honest, I don't actually like that scene. I thought that was a little too much, but
I liked it. It was just the kind of thing. You can tell he's that thing of like he's fully into just like he loves them all, but they really that's like feeling for him.
I think the goats were the final break, but well, okay. Mantis trying to do the goat call I love that one. I hope that turns into a meme because that was great. But yeah. You mentioned the humor. I will say one that did not land with me. Most of them landed. But right at the beginning, and this is a throwback to Ragnarok as well, where Korg is narrating all of the terrible things that have happened, and just like, you could, let them be serious moments.
Yeah.
You don't have, Asgard blew up. You don't have to make a pithy comment about Asgard blowing up. It's a tragic event.
Yeah.
Although
Loki died. Then Loki died.
I was going to say the Loki died one is really good. He died, and then he died again, and then he died again, and you're like, actually, he's still alive, still. Yeah. So, I wish you get that scene where Thor gets naked. It's in the trailer, so that's not really too much. And you see the back, and he's got like the Loki died tattoo. I wish that they had like date crossed out, date crossed out, date. You know how some people do with when they're trying to remember someone, they've got the date that they died or was born, and like that would have been a nice little like cheeky nod there.
Yeah. But no, like I said, I really enjoyed I can't wait to watch it again when it drops on Disney Plus. My gut is saying Disney Plus Day. That's my it could be a week or two before it. Because it would be we're 6 weeks from now. So
it's about halfway through August, towards the end of August.
So 15th, 20th, 29th. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's the 19th, around the 17th, 19th of August. So you're only about 2-3 weeks out from Disney Plus Day.
I could see them holding it back for an extra couple of weeks, especially since it looks like it's going to do pretty well at the box office.
Yeah. So I mean, they might not. They might drop at the end of August as like the big month. That's their big release of the month. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed this film. I think a lot of I've seen a lot of people not really liking it, and it's like I kind of think if you don't like his comedy style, this is really that probably will just put you off. And the cheesy jokes and the rest of it, and the way he acts. I mean, I just feel like Thor in Ragnarok and in this is so different from that first film, but he's grown a lot. He's been around more people, and he's got a lot more issues and stuff.
I mean, I do understand the perspective, though. The shift between Dark World or Avengers 2 and Ragnarok and now Love and Thunder, the characterization is a massive jarring shift. And I think that was one of the complaints I had back in Ragnarok was, this is a very different Thor, and you don't really understand where the change came from. Because it's like that at the beginning of Ragnarok. It's not like he got thrust into, the Grandmaster's realm and had an epiphany moment and became a new character. No, he was this way at the beginning of Ragnarok. And it's very different from, Dark World Thor and Avengers 2 Thor. So I can totally understand where people are coming from that, even now that this is the established current version of Thor. And these are two functionally different characters at this point.
No, but I really like the way, and he's hanging around. He ain't going anywhere. He's going to be returning, and it looks like I think Chris Hemsworth is very much aware that this is he's quite happy doing it. I mean, the fact that he even got his daughter in to play a major part in it as well.
I think that's the difference, though, is that he is very clearly having a ton of fun with this role, whereas early Thor was much more serious role, was much more in line with the other characters. Serious is in like you're supposed to be more serious character. Obviously, they still had humor, but you could kind of get the impression that he'd be on the same track as like Chris Evans or Robert Downey Jr. Like, we had our fun, we did our movies, and now we're done. Whereas the reinterpretation of the character in Ragnarok and Love and Thunder really went with Hemsworth just going, I love this. I will continue doing this as long as you let me do this. And that's why
it might also have that big difference as well of maybe them working together. It's more they're just it's more fun, and therefore they're just getting on. What did you think of like the whole aspect of them using the volume for this, the effects? Because on the bigger screen, it was much more noticeable of when they were of how they were using it. I don't think it made too much of a difference, but you could definitely tell it looked a bit different than normal.
It did, and I think they disguised it well enough. They did a better job of disguising it than, say, Boba Fett did. Yeah. I think, it goes back to what I was saying during, was it Miss Marvel? We were talking about it. They're figuring out what works with it and what doesn't, and that knowledge is starting to propagate, and they're starting to realize, okay, it works with these kind of scenes, it doesn't work with these kind of scenes, and they're not yet at the point where they've got it down pat, but I think for the most part with Thor, they did a good job. I think it helped, though. I wanted to call this out anyway. That whole sequence in the Shadow Realm, which is very clearly using the volume, is cinematically fantastic. I loved that entire sequence, the use of black and white, the use of color fading into black and white, fading out of black and white, that entire sequence, and them playing around with frame rate too. There were definitely parts where it felt like more classical sci-fi. Honestly, I know the Marvel and the Star Wars movies don't typically win awards, but if I was ever going to vote for like a best visual effects kind of thing, that sequence is the one that I would nominate out of all of the Disney catalog that's come out this year.
Definitely feels like, in some way, like when they were there and when they were in like the realm of the gods, it worked. I don't know necessarily, like, when they were in Scotland, they might as well have just done it like in person. If you can use a real set, use it. I think, hopefully. But yeah, I thought it looked all right. I a lot of people have been kind of talking about it. It's like, yeah, it's got less places to hide on a big screen, and that's the thing. It's on home, you might not notice it as much, but when it's on a massive, great big IMAX screen, it is a little bit more noticeable. But again, sometimes like, well, they're battling on a bloody moon. Where exactly? How are they going to do this realistically?
I mean, there's certainly that aspect to it too, and I think I've definitely been guilty of this myself. But with the COVID protocols in place, I've definitely been more aware of like, when are they in populated areas? When are they in not populated areas? When are they very distinctly making sure that it's only 2 characters available at a time or 3 characters available at a time? And COVID in the last couple of years, I've been very aware of that. And so I think, like, even if they were using the volume, but we didn't have the COVID experience to go through, it would have been a lot less noticeable that they were doing that kind of thing. But as with most visual effects, they will get better at it. Future movies, it'll be a lot less noticeable because they'll know when to use it and when not to use it. And also, future movies, they'll have more options available to them again because things are opening up and becoming usable that they probably could not use during the construction of this movie.
No, it's like I said, it wasn't as bad. I don't think it was that bad, but I also feel like, as a whole, this movie was fun, and I feel the general audience is going to pick up on this being a fun superhero film rather than being some like a gritty, dark, And I feel like in some ways, it was like Spider-Man: No Way Home, where it was fun. It was just a fun experience, and I feel like Thor and Love and Thunder is much more fun than like Black Widow and Eternals. See, I kind of like Shang-Chi and Thor: Love and Thunder had that fun factor to it, and more people are more like, no, it was just fun. It's like, well, you got dragons and all these kind of flying goats. It's hard to take them seriously when they play out on the humor, whereas something like Black Widow was much more grounded in reality.
Aside from the giant flying fortress at the end, yes. But that is the point. The movies have different tones. They have different audiences. They have different things that they're aiming for, which is a good thing. We don't want a situation where we're back to Iron Man 3 and Thor: Dark World, where it's literally like, guys, we can see the formula. Can you mix it up a bit and try something different? And then, of course, Winter Soldier and Guardians of the Galaxy come along and we go, oh, you guys are playing with the formula and you're having fun and so on. So, yeah, this is definitely a more lighthearted film, but it does have some moments of depth to it. Christian Bale is fantastic as Gore. I feel like his story was actually pretty satisfying, even though he only got 5 minutes of screen time.
I had a lot of people saying that, and I'm like, well, he was on screen a lot, but it was like, I suppose it was just like the way they spread it out. I don't know. I love this character. I just wish they didn't kill him off. It's like, please stop killing him off.
That's where I was going with that. I felt it was a satisfying arc for the character, and okay, if you're going to kill off a character, at least his makes sense with his story has ended. But especially with Christian Bale running that character, this had the potential to be a Thanos level.
Yeah,
this is the bad guy of Phase 4, 5, and 6, and I know there's Kang and so on and other things, but the way he played him, the power level that he was at, the threat level that he was at, you could have definitely drawn him out as a core villain for several movies. And of course, I will never really say no to Christian Bale just going nuts and having fun with the character, because this is not. You could tell he was definitely we're going to go chew some scenery. We're going to really, build a story around this character. I would have liked to have seen more. I'm satisfied with the ending, but man, you could see him being a villain over the course of several movies and just being like, yes. And then when he loses at the end, it would be all that much more satisfying.
Yeah, no, it's like I said, I really enjoyed this one. There's, like I say, a few little issues here and there, but generally on a whole, I think this is great. I feel this is it was just fun. And I think that's what really got me, was I enjoyed it. It was fun. It was stupid. Lots of laughing, lots of action. It was a summer blockbuster, and it was nice not to have the whole thing with multiverses, and it was connected to other movies, but it wasn't. They can't. I don't know. I just, like I said, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a good fun one. It
was, and again, the not multiverse aspect to it was kind of nice. I know the Shadow Realm technically is probably a multiverse, is probably a secondary plane, but yeah, to not have that, to not have it be connected to Doctor Strange or No Way Home was kind of nice. It's got its own problem, and that's what it's focused on. It's not focused on doing bigger picture stuff. And again, going back to Miss Marvel, maybe if they weren't talking about multiverses, we'd like it a bit more overall, because that doesn't really seem to fit with the story. But anyway, this is Thor: Love and Thunder. Had a great time. Probably going to see it a second time at theaters, and that is the first time that I can say that I probably will follow through that since the COVID protocols have come into place. So this is the first one.
Well, on that note, guys, thank you very much for joining us. Make sure you let us know in the comments below what you thought of Thor: Love and Thunder. Do you agree with our thoughts? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Go check us out over at whatsondisneyplus.com. And on that note, guys, thank you very much. See you guys soon. Later. Thank you very much for watching this video. Make sure you go check us out over at whatsondisneyplus.com. Like, follow, and subscribe. Also, a huge thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon and also on our YouTube channel memberships. And I shall see you guys in another video. Laters.